Story number 1. The Last Deliveries, Los Angeles, California. I can still remember that night as if it were etched into my very soul, a night that transformed an ordinary pizza delivery job into a chilling ordeal that I'd never forget. It was late autumn in Los Angeles, a time when the city's bright lights masked the shadows lurking in its quieter neighborhoods. I worked at a small pizza joint on the outskirts, delivering pies to upscale neighborhoods filled with sprawling mansions that seemed abandoned or rarely visited. It was a wealthy area, but beneath the surface lay secrets and stories best left untold. It was nearing midnight when my shift was winding down. I was exhausted after a long day, eager to get home and collapse into bed. Just as I was about to head out, my phone buzzed with one last order. The address was unfamiliar, tucked away at the end of a narrow, winding street that I'd never delivered to before. Curiosity piqued, I decided to take the job, figuring it was just another quiet delivery to end my night. The address led me through streets lined with cobblestone and elegant homes with overgrown gardens. Most of the houses were grand but looked deserted, their windows dusty and dark, save for a few dim lights flickering from upstairs. As I approached the final address, an imposing Victorian-style mansion emerged from the darkness, its wooden door heavy and ornate, surrounded by towering, twisted trees that seemed to guard the property. I parked my car at the curb, grabbed the pizza from the back, and walked up the gravel path to the front door. The night was eerily silent, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the cool breeze. I knocked, but there was no response. After a few moments of waiting, I decided to ring the bell again. To my surprise, the door creaked open slowly, as if inviting me inside. Heart-pounding, I stepped into the foyer. The interior was dimly lit, with grand but dusty furnishings and an air of neglect. I called out, "Pizza delivery," but received only silence in return. I moved towards the living room, where the order specified to place the pizza on the table by the large bay window. I set the box down, glancing around nervously. When I turned to leave, the door slammed shut and locked itself with a resounding thud. Panic set in as I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Looking around the room, my eyes fell upon old photographs lining the walls. They depicted happy families, elegant parties, and scenic views of the neighborhood. But as I scanned the images, a chill ran down my spine. I saw pictures of myself, wearing my pizza delivery uniform, smiling awkwardly among the subjects of the photos. Confusion and fear twisted inside me. How could these pictures exist? I had never worked here before. Desperate to understand what was happening, I began exploring the house. Each step echoed through the empty halls, amplifying the sense of isolation. I ascended the creaky staircase to the second floor, where I found a small study illuminated by the faint glow of a desk lamp. The room was cluttered with old papers, a worn-out lamp, and a leather-bound journal lying open on the desk. Curiosity overcame my fear, and I began to read the journal. It detailed the lives of the family that once lived in the mansion, a happy household marred by internal conflicts, financial troubles, and a series of mysterious disappearances. As I read on, the entries became more frantic, describing a night much like this one, when the entire family vanished without a trace, leaving the house to fall into ruin. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized the parallels between the journal and my current situation. I was a pizza delivery driver, delivering to a seemingly abandoned house on a cold, lonely night. The final entries hinted at restless spirits trapped within the house, unable to move on until the last order was completed. Suddenly, a shadowy figure materialized in the doorway, blocking my path. It was a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. He didn't speak, but his presence was oppressive, making the air around me feel thick and heavy. I tried to back away, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The man slowly approached, extending a hand towards me. In his palm was a pizza box identical to mine. My heart raced as I reached out to take it. The moment my fingers touched the cardboard, a thick, black smoke billowed from the box, enveloping the room in darkness. My vision blurred, and the world around me seemed to dissolve into a swirling vortex of shadows and whispers. I found myself standing in a different version of the living room, the same one I had just left, but it was alive with ghostly apparitions. The spirits of the family members hovered around me, their faces etched with pain and confusion. They reached out to me, their whispers filling my mind with fragmented memories and emotions. I realized they were reliving their final night, trapped in a loop of their last moments. Desperation set in as I struggled to break free from the spectral grip. The realization hit me, I was now part of their story, another soul trapped in the mansion's curse. I could feel my identity fading, my existence intertwining with the restless spirits around me. Just as I was about to succumb to the darkness, a spark of determination ignited within me. I remembered the journal and the stories it contained. If I could find a way to complete the final order and break the cycle, perhaps I could free myself and the trapped souls. Summoning every ounce of strength, I called out to the spirits, pleading for their help. The atmosphere shifted, the oppressive weight lifting slightly as the spirits acknowledged my plea. I focused on the task at hand, visualizing the completion of the final order. The images from the journal replayed in my mind, guiding me through the process. I felt a connection to the mansion's tragic past, a bridge between the living and the dead. With a final surge of energy, the smoke dissipated, and the room brightened. The door, which had been locked tight, swung open once more. The spirits began to fade, their faces softening into expressions of peace. I stepped through the doorway, the cool night air welcoming me back to reality. I raced to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. Once inside, I didn't waste a moment starting the engine. As I sped away from the mansion, I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something, but there was nothing, no spirits, no apparitions, just the empty road stretching out before me. When I finally reached home, I was drenched in sweat, my heart still pounding from the ordeal. I searched my house, only to find the pizza box from that night sitting on my kitchen table, untouched. Panic surged through me as I realized that the house had somehow linked to my own residence, merging their haunted past with my present. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night lingered like a persistent shadow. I tried to move on, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Strange occurrences became commonplace, objects moving on their own, whispers in the dead of night, and the ever-present sense of being trapped in a nightmare. One evening, I decided to confront the mystery head-on. I returned to the mansion, determined to uncover the truth and put the spirits to rest. Armed with the journal and a resolve forged from fear and desperation, I entered the house once more. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken sorrow. I made my way to the study, the place where it all began. The journal lay open, its pages glowing with an ethereal light. As I read the final entry, a revelation struck me: the curse could only be broken by completing the last delivery, ensuring that no soul remained unfinished. With newfound determination, I retraced my steps to the living room, setting the pizza box on the table once again. As I did, the spirits materialized around me, their presence no longer menacing but hopeful. They reached out, guiding me to fulfill the final order, their energy intertwining with mine. The process was grueling, a test of will and spirit. But as I focused on completing the task, a sense of calm washed over me. The spirits began to dissolve, their faces serene as they found peace at last. The mansion seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive darkness lifting to reveal a bright, welcoming light. As the last spirit faded, the door to the mansion opened wide, allowing me to leave. I stepped outside, the cool night air filling my lungs with fresh hope. The curse had been broken, the spirits finally free to move on. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the lingering fear replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. Driving away from the mansion, I glanced back one last time. The house stood silent and still, no longer a beacon of darkness but a monument to the lives that once thrived within its walls. I knew that I had changed that night, my life forever intertwined with the mansion's haunted history. From that day forward, I never took a single delivery lightly. The experience had taught me the importance of understanding the stories behind each order, the lives connected to every address. And sometimes, late at night when the city was quiet, I'd catch a glimpse of the mansion in my rearview mirror, a silent reminder of the night I faced the unknown and emerged victorious. Story number 2. The Unanswered Order, Detroit, Michigan. I've always known that Detroit has its share of ghost stories. The city's rich history, combined with its periods of boom and bust, has left behind more than just abandoned buildings. It's left a trail of mysteries that linger in the shadows. But nothing prepared me for the night I delivered pizza to an empty house, a night that would blur the lines between reality and nightmare. It was a chilly October evening, the kind where the wind whistles through the cracks of old houses and the streets are slick with rain. I worked for Tony's Pizza, a small joint nestled in one of Detroit's quieter neighborhoods. Most of my deliveries were routine, families enjoying a cozy night in or college students cramming for exams. But tonight was different. I glanced at the screen of my delivery app. It was a large order to a house at the end of Elmwood Drive, a street I'd never delivered to before. The address was in a part of town known for its abandoned homes and empty lots, remnants of better days now swallowed by neglect. The driver next to me, Jake, always joked that Elmwood Drive was haunted, but I chalked it up to urban legends meant to scare kids. As I navigated the winding road, the streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, eerie shadows across the sidewalks. The house at the end of the block loomed ahead, a Victorian-era structure with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. Despite its dilapidated appearance, a single light burned in one of the upstairs windows, casting a dim glow that seemed out of place. I parked my car a few feet from the front door, the gravel crunching under my tires. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the pizza from the back and approached the house. The door was partially ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. My heart rate quickened, not because of fear, but the unease that comes from delivering to a place that feels forgotten. I placed the pizza on the porch and pulled out my phone to call the number listed on the order. The call went straight to voicemail. "Hello, this is Tony's Pizza. Your order has arrived," I said into the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. I waited a few moments, hoping someone would respond, but the silence remained unbroken. Deciding it was time to leave, I turned to head back to my car. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of the front door creaking open. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the door swing wider, revealing the dimly lit interior. I froze, my mind racing. Did I hear that right? The house was supposed to be empty. Summoning my courage, I took a step back, ready to flee. But then, the door slammed shut with a force that echoed down the empty street. Panic surged through me as I reached for the pizza box, intent on retrieving it, but the box was already open. Inside lay a single piece of paper with a chilling message scrawled in messy handwriting: "Don't leave. We're hungry." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the note. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone, or something, emerge from the darkness of the house. But the street remained silent, the only sound the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of leaves. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread, telling myself it was just a prank or some twisted joke. Maybe someone in the neighborhood decided to mess with me, exploiting the eerie reputation of Elmwood Drive. But deep down, a nagging fear told me this was something more sinister. I took a tentative step towards the door, my instincts screaming at me to run. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I pushed the door open again, this time fully. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the single light in the upstairs window. Dust danced in the air, catching the light and creating a hazy glow. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone here?" No response. Just the oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I glanced back at the open pizza box, the message still blaring at me. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Was this house truly abandoned, or was there something, or someone, lurking within? A cold breeze swept through the room, sending shivers down my spine. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling suddenly very small and very alone in this decaying house. The urge to leave was overwhelming, but something held me in place, a curiosity mingled with fear. I took another step forward, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. The living room was sparse, with only a few pieces of antique furniture covered in white sheets. Cobwebs hung from the corners, and the air was thick with the scent of mold and decay. As I moved deeper into the house, the floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each step echoing ominously. Upstairs, the light from the window flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking my every move. My hand trembled as I reached for the railing, pulling myself up the staircase. The second floor was empty, save for the room with the single window. I approached cautiously, the door to the room slightly ajar. As I pushed it open, the room was revealed to be a child's bedroom, untouched by time. A small bed with a faded quilt, a wooden toy chest, and a lone rocking chair that creaked softly as if someone had just left it. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft thud. The light from the window illuminated a small desk against the far wall, papers scattered across its surface. Curiosity getting the better of me, I walked over and began sifting through the papers. Most were old letters and photographs, documenting the lives of a family long gone. One photograph caught my eye. It was a picture of a family, parents and 2 children, standing in front of the very house I was in. My heart sank as I noticed something horrifying. I was in one of the photos, sitting on the steps with the family, wearing the same uniform I had on now. How was that possible? I had never seen this house before, never delivered pizza here until tonight. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the implications. Was I somehow connected to this place, to this family? My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. Before I could process further, the room grew colder, the shadows lengthening as the light flickered and dimmed. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut again, this time with more force. Panic set in as I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but my cries were swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The temperature plummeted, my breath visible in the air as I shivered uncontrollably. In the corner of the room, the rocking chair began to move, creaking back and forth on its own. My eyes darted to the chair, heart pounding. Then, out of the darkness, figures began to materialize, ghostly apparitions of the family from the photograph, their faces contorted in silent screams of anguish. I backed away, stumbling into the desk and knocking over papers. The spirits advanced slowly, their presence overwhelming, filling the room with a palpable sense of sorrow and rage. I could feel their pain, their hunger, not for food, but for release from their eternal torment. Desperate to escape, I turned to run, but the room seemed to stretch endlessly, corridors twisting and turning, leading me deeper into the house's labyrinthine interior. Every door I tried led to another dead end, another room filled with restless spirits yearning for freedom. Time lost all meaning as I wandered the haunted halls, the cries and whispers of the dead echoing in my ears. I was trapped in a nightmare, a living ghost in a house that fed on my fear. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred, leaving me questioning my own sanity. Finally, I found myself back in the living room, the pizza box still open on the table. The message glowed ominously, "Don't leave. We're hungry." The words seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, a command I couldn't defy. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I grabbed the pizza box and tore out the piece of paper. The moment my fingers touched it, a surge of energy coursed through me, a connection formed between the living and the dead. I understood then that the spirits were bound to this place, unable to move on until their final hunger was appeased. Determined to break the cycle, I placed the pizza back on the table and addressed the spirits. "I'm sorry for disturbing you. I'll help you find peace." The apparitions paused, their ghostly forms flickering. A sense of hope mingled with the sorrow as the spirits began to communicate, guiding me through the process of lifting the curse that held them captive. Together, we performed the rituals necessary to release their souls, each step bringing them closer to the light. As the last spirit faded, a brilliant light filled the room, dispelling the darkness and lifting the oppressive weight that had held me captive for what felt like an eternity. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the once haunted structure now silent and at peace. I found myself back on the porch, the night air cool against my skin. The door was closed, the single light in the window extinguished, leaving the house to stand as a testament to the spirits who had finally found their rest. Exhausted but triumphant, I made my way back to my car, the memory of that night etched into my soul forever. Driving away from Elmwood Drive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had changed. The experience had peeled back the layers of Detroit's haunted past, revealing the stories of those who had been forgotten by time. I knew that I had a responsibility now, a duty to remember and honor the lives that had been lost in the shadows of the city. From that night on, every delivery carried with it a deeper sense of purpose. I became more attuned to the stories behind each address, understanding that even the most abandoned places held memories and histories that deserved to be acknowledged. And sometimes, late at night, I'd catch a glimpse of a ghostly figure in the rearview mirror, a silent reminder of the night I delivered more than just pizza. Story number 3. Delivery in the rain, Portland, Oregon. The rain had been relentless that evening in Portland, drumming a steady rhythm against the pavement and transforming the city into a blur of reflections and shadows. I had been working the night shift at Luigi's Pizza for the past year, navigating the maze of rain-soaked streets to deliver cheesy goodness to hungry customers. It was the kind of job that kept you indoors, away from the unpredictable Oregon weather, but tonight was different. Tonight, the rain felt heavier, almost oppressive, as if the sky itself was weeping. I glanced at my phone, the screen illuminated by the dim light of the van's dashboard. Another order had just come in, a late-night request from a secluded neighborhood I wasn't familiar with. The address was tucked away in one of Portland's older districts, known for its charming yet eerie Victorian houses and narrow, winding streets. Jake, my coworker, had warned me about the area. They say it's haunted, he had joked, but I didn't take him seriously. Ghost stories were for kids, or maybe just for the lonely souls of a rainy Portland night. As I navigated the slick roads, the wipers struggled against the torrential downpour, each swipe barely keeping up with the sheets of water cascading from the sky. The GPS directed me to a house at the end of a particularly narrow lane, flanked by towering trees whose branches scraped against the windows, creating an almost sinister backdrop. The house itself stood tall and imposing, its facade darkened by years of neglect. The once vibrant paint was peeling, revealing the bare wood beneath, and the windows were obscured by grime and streaks of rainwater. Parking my car a safe distance from the house, I grabbed the hot pizza from the insulated bag, the aroma momentarily cutting through the damp air. The street was deserted, the only sounds the relentless rain and the distant hum of traffic. I approached the front door, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of rain-soaked leaves and mud that covered the pathway. Taking a deep breath, I knocked, the sound echoing unnaturally in the silence. A moment later, the door swung open. Standing there was a woman, tall and slender, clad in a black raincoat that seemed to absorb the darkness around her. Her hair was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, casting her face in shadow. Without a word, she reached out and took the pizza from my hands, her fingers cold against the warmth of the box. Then, she handed me an envelope, her grip firm and unyielding. "Open it when you get home," she instructed, her voice soft but carrying an edge that made my skin crawl. There was something unsettling about her, something that made me hesitate, but I nodded and turned to leave. As I walked back to my car, the rain seemed to intensify, each drop like icy needles piercing through my clothes. The envelope felt heavy in my pocket, its presence a constant reminder of the strange encounter. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the woman was more than just an ordinary customer. Once inside the safety of my apartment, I sat down at the kitchen table, the rain tapping against the windows like a relentless drummer. I pulled out the envelope, my hands trembling slightly as I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. My heart skipped a beat as I saw myself, standing in front of that very house, holding a pizza box. The image was clear, taken moments before I had delivered the pizza, but there was no sign of the woman in the raincoat. Just me, alone in the frame, the rain blurring the edges of the house behind me. Confusion settled in. How could this be? I had just delivered the pizza minutes ago. Was this some kind of prank? I scanned the photograph for any clues, but there was nothing, no timestamp, no notes, just the haunting image of myself in an unfamiliar setting. Determined to make sense of it, I decided to revisit the house. Maybe there was an explanation waiting for me there. Packing my coat and grabbing a flashlight, I ventured out into the storm once more, the city's lights smeared by the relentless rain. The streets were empty, the usual vibrancy of Portland muted under the oppressive weather. As I approached the house, memories of the previous night flooded back. The woman's presence, the eerie silence, the heavy feeling that something wasn't right. The house seemed even more foreboding in the daylight, the shadows cast by the overgrown trees creating a maze of darkness and light. I approached the door cautiously, knocking softly, half expecting no one to answer. To my surprise, the door opened once again. The woman stood there, her raincoat drenched and clinging to her frame. This time, her face was visible, and it was different from the night before. Her eyes were hollow, void of any warmth or humanity, staring directly into mine with an intensity that made me shiver. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Now you're part of the story." Before I could respond, the door slammed shut, and the house plunged into darkness. The temperature dropped suddenly, my breath visible in the cold air as I fumbled for my flashlight. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing a grand foyer untouched by time, with ornate decorations now covered in dust and cobwebs. I ventured further inside, the door slamming shut behind me with a finality that echoed through the empty halls. The rain's fury was muted inside the house, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed in on all sides. The photograph burned a hole in my pocket, the image of myself staring back at me from a moment I couldn't fully comprehend. As I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the house seemed to shift and change, rooms appearing and disappearing in a disorienting dance. I stumbled upon a hallway lined with old portraits, their subjects' eyes following my every move with unsettling lifelike intensity. Each step I took seemed to draw me deeper into the house's dark history, the walls whispering secrets I couldn't quite understand. In the center of the house stood a grand staircase, its once elegant railing now splintered and worn. As I ascended, the sound of my footsteps echoed unnervingly, a reminder of my solitary presence in this forsaken place. Reaching the top, I found a room bathed in a faint, ethereal light. The woman stood there, her form flickering like a candle in the wind, her eyes still empty but now filled with a silent plea. She pointed to a mirror on the far wall, her gesture guiding me toward the glass. I approached cautiously, the air thick with anticipation and fear. As I peered into the mirror, the reflection staring back at me was not my own. Instead, I saw a version of myself from that previous night, holding the pizza box, standing before the house with the woman beside me. Behind me, the scene replayed, the delivery, the exchange, the unopened door, and the ominous feeling that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the reflection shifted. The woman in the mirror smiled, a twisted, malevolent grin that didn't match her serene appearance. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she reached out from the mirror's surface, her hand passing through the glass to grasp my shoulder with a force that sent me stumbling backward. "Now you belong here," she intoned, her voice resonating through the room. "Forever part of the story." Panic surged through me as I turned to flee, but the door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall of darkness. The rain's roar was now deafening, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within. Desperation clawed at my mind as I struggled to find a way out, the photograph burning a path of realization in my thoughts. I understood then that the house was a trap, a nexus between the living and the dead, feeding off the fears and stories of those who dared to enter. The photograph was a link, a tether that bound me to this haunted place, ensuring that my presence would be forever etched into its lore. As the storm raged on, the house came alive with whispers and shadows, each one a fragment of untold stories seeking release. I realized that to escape, I had to confront the house's past, to uncover the truth behind its curse and find a way to sever the bond that held me captive. Guided by a flickering candle that appeared in my hand, I delved deeper into the house's history, piecing together the fragments of lives long gone. The walls seemed to breathe with memories, each room a testament to heartbreak, loss, and unresolved pain. The woman, now a constant presence, led me through the maze of sorrow, her role as both guide and guardian of the house's dark secrets becoming painfully clear. In the heart of the house, I found an old study, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten dreams. Shelves lined with dusty books and faded photographs told the story of a family torn apart by tragedy. The journal on the desk, its pages yellowed and brittle, held the key to breaking the curse. As I read the final entry, the realization dawned on me. The family had been victims of a terrible event, their spirits unable to move on, trapped within the house's walls. The woman was their protector, bound to ensure that no one else would fall victim to the same fate. But her methods had twisted over time, her grief and anger transforming her into a vengeful entity that fed on the fear of those who dared to enter. Understanding that the only way to free myself and the spirits was to release the house from its torment, I gathered the remnants of their stories, the fragments of their lives, and performed a ritual of closure. The process was arduous, each step a battle against the house's lingering darkness, but with every action, the oppressive weight began to lift. As the final incantation echoed through the room, the storm outside began to abate, the rain softening to a gentle drizzle. The house exhaled a sigh of relief, the shadows receding and the whispers fading into silence. The woman's form softened, her eyes no longer hollow but filled with gratitude and peace. "You've done it," she whispered, her voice now gentle and serene. "Thank you." With the curse lifted, the door to the study reopened, revealing a clear path to the outside world. I stepped through, the fresh scent of rain mingling with the lingering echoes of the house's past. As I crossed the threshold, the photograph in my hand began to fade, the image of myself dissolving into nothingness. Back in my apartment, the rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a tranquil stillness. I placed the empty envelope on the table, a sense of closure washing over me. The experience had changed me, deepening my understanding of the stories that lay hidden beneath Portland's rainy facade. From that night on, every delivery carried with it a heightened awareness, a respect for the histories intertwined with each address. I became attuned to the whispers of the past, recognizing that even the most ordinary moments could hold extraordinary tales. And sometimes, when the rain fell just right, I'd catch a glimpse of a woman in a black raincoat in my peripheral vision, a silent guardian watching over the stories that deserve to be remembered. Story number 4. The Final Deliveries, Savannah, Georgia. Rain poured relentlessly over Savannah that autumn night, turning the cobblestone streets slick and shimmering under the flickering lampposts. The humid air clung to my skin, and each drop that splattered against my windshield seemed to echo the growing unease in my chest. I was working the late shift for Southern Slice Pizza, a modest establishment nestled in one of Savannah's historic districts. Deliveries during these hours were rare, especially to places I wasn't familiar with, but tonight was different. Tonight, my phone buzzed with an order that would change everything. The address was peculiar, near the cemetery gates. I'd delivered to nearby neighborhoods before, but this one felt off the map, even for Savannah. The city was known for its beautiful, albeit sometimes eerie, cemeteries, each with its own legends and ghost stories. Jake, my coworker, had often warned me about making deliveries in areas close to old cemeteries after dark. People say the spirits aren't too fond of late-night deliveries, he joked, but I had never taken him seriously until now. I glanced at the screen again, double-checking the address. It was located near Bonaventure Cemetery, one of Savannah's most famous and hauntingly beautiful resting places. The thought of delivering pizza to a place so steeped in history and mystery sent a chill down my spine, but the promise of an extra tip was hard to ignore. I grabbed the insulated bag, made my way to my old sedan, and set off into the storm. The streets were nearly empty, the usual hustle and bustle of Savannah replaced by the rhythmic patter of rain. The GPS guided me through winding roads flanked by moss-draped oak trees and grand antebellum homes. As I neared the cemetery, the atmosphere changed. The air felt thicker, the darkness more oppressive. The entrance to Bonaventure loomed ahead, its wrought iron gates partially obscured by the downpour. I parked a few blocks away, the car's engine struggling against the wind's howl. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the pizza and began the short walk to the delivery point. The cemetery gates were grand but worn, the statues and carvings on them barely visible in the rain. I could see the faint outline of a man standing near one of the gravestones, waiting. Approaching cautiously, I noticed the man was dressed entirely in black, his face obscured by the shadows cast by his wide-brimmed hat. His presence was unnerving, almost spectral, as if he had materialized from the very mist that enveloped the cemetery. "Delivery for you," I said, extending the pizza box. He didn't respond, simply taking the box with a slow, deliberate motion. His hands were cold, sending a chill through the cardboard. As he paid me in cash, our fingers brushed briefly, and a jolt of electricity shot through me, making me pull back instinctively. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and hollow, echoing unnaturally in the quiet night. Before I could respond, he turned and vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the trees and rain. I stood there for a moment, bewildered, before turning back to my car, my heart pounding. Driving away from the cemetery, I tried to shake off the unsettling encounter. The rain had eased slightly, but an uneasy feeling settled over me. When I got home, soaked to the bone and shivering, I couldn't wait to leave the night behind. I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a towel, and headed to the kitchen to grab a drink. As I sat at the table, peeling off my wet jacket, I noticed the pizza box lying untouched. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it, expecting to see the usual toppings and maybe some condensation. Instead, nestled inside was an old, yellowed envelope. My name was printed on it in elegant, flowing script, "Thank you. See you soon." Confused, I reached for the envelope. My fingers trembled as I pulled out a single photograph. It was a black and white image of me, standing right where I had delivered the pizza, holding the box. In the background, the man in black was clearly visible, his face still shadowed and his figure slightly blurred, as if he were fading into the night. Puzzled and unnerved, I examined the photograph more closely. The date printed on the back sent chills down my spine, 1923. Savannah had a long history, and Bonaventure Cemetery was the final resting place for many of its most notable citizens. But how could there be a photo of me from a time nearly a century before my birth? My mind raced with questions. Was this some kind of sick joke? Had someone tampered with my delivery? I considered calling Jake, but his shift had ended hours ago, and I didn't have his personal number. The house was quiet, except for the persistent drip of rainwater from the eaves. Unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, I decided to do some research. The next morning, the sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the damp streets of Savannah. I sat at my computer, the photograph spread out before me, and began digging into the history of Bonaventure Cemetery. As I delved into old records and newspaper archives, a story began to emerge. In 1923, a man named Thomas Blackwell had been found dead under mysterious circumstances near the cemetery gates. Blackwell was a well-known figure, a successful businessman with no known enemies. His death had been ruled an accident, but whispers of foul play and restless spirits circulated among the locals. One article caught my eye, mysterious photo linked to unsolved death of Thomas Blackwell. It detailed how, years after his death, residents reported sightings of a man in black near the cemetery, always at the same spot where Blackwell had been found. Some claimed he was searching for something, or someone, while others believed he was a guardian of sorts, protecting the cemetery from unseen forces. The more I read, the more the pieces began to fit together. Could the man in black be connected to Thomas Blackwell? And how was he connected to me? That night, unable to sleep, I decided to return to the cemetery. The memory of the rain-soaked delivery and the eerie photograph lingered in my mind, compelling me to seek answers. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, the evening air cool and crisp against my skin. As I approached Bonaventure Cemetery, the sight of the grand gates greeted me once more, now bathed in the soft light of dusk. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like whispers in the fading light. I made my way to the spot where I had delivered the pizza, hoping to find some clue or explanation. To my surprise, the area was deserted, the gravestone standing silent and solemn. But as I stood there, a familiar presence made my blood run cold. The man in black was there again, standing beneath an ancient oak tree, his figure as imposing as ever. "Why are you following me?" I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine. There was a sorrow in his gaze, a depth of emotion that transcended time. He didn't respond, but gestured toward the nearby graves, specifically one with an ornate marker bearing the name Thomas Blackwell. Understanding dawned on me. This was no ordinary ghost story, it was a plea for help, a connection across the ages that needed to be mended. I approached the gravestone, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. As I stood before the tombstone, I spoke softly, "Thomas Blackwell, I don't know how, but I want to help you find peace." The air grew thick, the temperature dropping as the sun dipped below the horizon. The man in black stepped forward, his presence more commanding than before. I could feel the weight of his sorrow, the burden of unfinished business that kept him tethered to this world. Suddenly, the ground beneath the gravestone began to tremble, and a spectral figure emerged from the earth. It was Thomas Blackwell himself, his form translucent and shimmering in the twilight. His eyes, once full of life, now reflected an eternal sadness. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice echoing through the cemetery. "He never let me go." I looked back at the man in black, realizing that he was not just a ghostly guardian, but perhaps a guide, leading me to this moment of revelation. The photograph, the mysterious delivery, it was all part of a story that needed to be told, a connection that spanned generations. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. Thomas reached out, his ethereal hand passing through mine with a touch that sent shivers down my spine. "Find the truth. Uncover what was lost. Only then can both of us find peace." Determined to honor his request, I vowed to delve deeper into the mysteries surrounding his death and the strange occurrences at the cemetery. Days turned into weeks as I immersed myself in research, uncovering old letters, forgotten diaries, and newspaper clippings that painted a picture of a man driven to despair. One document stood out, a letter written by Thomas Blackwell himself, hidden away in a dusty archive. It detailed his growing paranoia, his belief that someone was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. The final lines were haunting: "If something happens to me, know that I've been betrayed. Trust no one." The pieces were finally falling into place. Thomas had been wrongfully accused, framed by someone close to him, leading to his untimely death. The man in black was his spirit, bound to the cemetery until the truth was revealed and his name was cleared. With renewed purpose, I continued my investigation, piecing together evidence that had long been buried. The breakthrough came when I discovered a forgotten diary belonging to Thomas's closest friend, detailing the events leading up to his death. It became clear that jealousy and deceit had led to a tragic betrayal, sealing Thomas's fate. Armed with this new information, I reached out to local historians and descendants of those involved, sharing my findings and urging them to acknowledge the truth. The community was initially skeptical, but as more evidence surfaced, the story gained traction, shedding light on a dark chapter of Savannah's history. One evening, as I stood once more at the cemetery gates, the man in black approached me. This time, his presence felt different, less ominous, more grateful. He handed me the old photograph, now faded but still clear, and nodded solemnly. "You've done well," he said, his voice tinged with relief. "Thomas can finally rest." As I watched, his form began to shimmer and fade, the rain easing into a gentle drizzle that seemed almost celebratory. The cemetery felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere lifted by the resolution of a century-old mystery. The next morning, Savannah greeted me with a bright, sunny day, the rain a distant memory. I received a call from Southern Slice Pizza, Jake on the other end with a mixture of awe and concern in his voice. "Did you ever figure out what happened on Elmwood Drive?" he asked, referring to the old address. I took a deep breath, the memory of that night now a part of me. I did. It wasn't just a delivery. It was a connection, a chance to help someone find peace. Sometimes, the stories we deliver carry more weight than we realize. Jake chuckled, a hint of unease still lingering in his voice. "Well, just be careful out there. Savannah's got a lot of history, and not all of it wants to stay buried." I nodded, knowing that my life had changed in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. The experience had taught me that even the most ordinary jobs could lead to extraordinary encounters, and that some stories were meant to be uncovered, no matter how old they were. From that day forward, every delivery carried with it a deeper sense of purpose. I became more attuned to the histories intertwined with each address, understanding that even the most forgotten places held memories and truths waiting to be revealed. And sometimes, late at night when the rain began to fall, I'd catch a glimpse of a man in black in my rearview mirror, a silent reminder of the night I delivered more than just pizza, and the spirits that still watched over Savannah's haunted grounds. Story number 5. Apartment 13. Rain poured down in relentless sheets, turning the streets of Chicago into a shimmering maze of reflections and shadows. The city never truly slept, but tonight, the incessant drizzle seemed to amplify the eerie silence that clung to the older neighborhoods. I was on my third shift of the week, delivering pizzas for Tony's Slice, a cozy joint nestled in one of Chicago's more historic districts. Most of my deliveries were routine, families enjoying a quiet night and/or college students burning the midnight oil. But tonight was different. Tonight, the delivery address stood out like a beacon of unease: 1303 West Elmwood Avenue, Apartment 13. Elmwood Avenue was a stretch known for its grand old buildings, remnants of Chicago's booming early 20th century architecture. However, Apartment 13 had long been shrouded in mystery. The building was a relic, its facade weathered by time and neglect. Stories of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances circulated among locals, but nothing concrete ever surfaced. They said the 13th floor was cursed, abandoned after a series of tragic events left the residents too frightened to stay. Superstitious folks avoided delivering there, and I was no exception until tonight. As I approached the building, the rain seemed to intensify, each drop a staccato beat against my windshield. The imposing structure loomed ahead, its windows dark and lifeless, except for apartment 13, where a single light flickered intermittently. My heart pounded as I pulled up to the curb, the engine's hum drowned out by the storm's fury. Grabbing the insulated bag, I stepped out into the downpour, the cold rain soaking through my jacket almost instantly. The entrance was guarded by wrought iron gates, rusted and creaking with each gust of wind. I pushed through, my shoes splashing through puddles on the cracked pavement. The lobby was dimly lit, the air thick with the musty scent of neglect. I made my way to the elevator, the metal doors groaning open as I pressed the button for the 13th floor. The ride-up was unnervingly silent. The elevator's old machinery protested with every floor it passed, the numbers flickering above me. At the 12th floor, the elevator jerked to a halt, the doors sliding open to reveal an empty hallway bathed in dim, flickering light. My pulse quickened. According to the building's directory, there was no 13th floor, only apartments 1 through 12. Had I made a mistake? No, the address was clear. Apartment 13 was real. I stepped out, the doors shutting with a finality that echoed down the empty corridor. The hallway was narrow, lined with doors that seemed to close in on me. The air grew colder, each breath visible in the dim light. At the far end, apartment 13 stood out, the lone door illuminated by a single, wavering bulb. I approached cautiously, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. Standing before the door, I raised my hand and knocked, the sound resonating through the hollow space. "Pizza delivery!" I called out, my voice betraying my unease. No response. I knocked again, harder this time, and called out once more. Still, nothing. Deciding to follow the instructions, I reached into the bag and pulled out the pizza, placing it carefully on the small mat beside the door. As I did, a chill ran down my spine. The door began to creak open, slowly and ominously, as if inviting me inside. My instinct screamed to leave, but curiosity anchored me to the spot. "Place the pizza and leave immediately," a voice commanded from within, cold and detached. I swallowed hard, nodding silently, and turned to leave. As I stepped back, the door swung shut with a force that sent the pizza box skidding across the mat. My heart raced as I glanced back towards the elevator, noticing that the doors were now closed, unresponsive to my frantic pressing of the button. Panic surged through me. I reached for the door, trying to peer inside, but the darkness beyond offered no answers. Taking a deep breath, I decided to leave, but as I turned, something caught my eye, a shadow moving swiftly across the hallway, slipping into one of the adjacent apartments. My legs felt heavy, my mind racing to rationalize what I was seeing. I fumbled with my phone, intending to call Jake, my coworker, but there was no signal. The rain pelted down harder, and the temperature seemed to drop further, my breath coming in quick, visible bursts. Desperate to escape, I made my way back to the elevator, only to find the doors firmly shut, refusing to budge. A sense of dread settled over me as I realized I was trapped. The lights flickered, casting long, twisted shadows along the corridor. I could hear faint whispers, almost like the building itself was alive, breathing in and out with each creak and groan. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct words that sent chills down my spine. "Don't stay. Leave now." I spun around, eyes darting from side to side, searching for the source. The flickering light revealed fleeting glimpses of apparitions, ghostly figures standing just out of reach, their faces obscured by shadows. I backed away, my mind screaming to run, but my body refused to obey. Suddenly, the door to apartment 13 swung open once more, this time revealing a figure standing in the doorway. Clad in an old-fashioned suit, the man's presence was both commanding and sorrowful. His eyes met mine, filled with an otherworldly sadness that pierced through my very being. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, his voice echoing unnaturally in the confined space. I stammered, trying to respond, but no words came out. The figure stepped forward, reaching out a hand that seemed to ripple with ethereal energy. The room around us began to shift, the walls dissolving into darkness as the true nature of apartment 13 revealed itself. I found myself standing in a vast, empty void, the remnants of the old apartment building stretching out infinitely in all directions. The rain had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in from every side. The man in black was gone, leaving me alone in the desolate expanse. A voice resonated through the void, cold and distant, yet undeniably present. This is the final floor, where lost souls remain tethered to the world they once knew. Your presence disrupts the balance, forcing you to confront the past that binds them. Images flashed before my eyes, scenes of the apartment building's history, tragedies that had unfolded on the 13th floor. Families torn apart by mysterious accidents, residents disappearing without a trace, and whispers of dark rituals performed in the dead of night. Each event left a lingering spirit, unable to move on, trapped in an eternal loop of their last moments. You are now part of our story, the voice continued. To leave, you must help us find peace. Desperation fueled my resolve. How? What can I do? The void began to pulse with energy, and the air grew thick with the sorrow of countless lost souls. I felt their presence around me, their pain and longing intertwining with my own fear. The realization hit me, my delivery was not just a simple task, it was a catalyst for breaking the cycle of despair that had ensnared Apartment 13 for decades. Summoning every ounce of courage, I focused on the task at hand. Tell me what I need to do. The voice guided me, revealing the key to releasing the trapped spirits, a ritual that required acknowledgement of their suffering and a promise to remember their stories. I listened intently, committing every detail to memory as the void transformed into a semblance of the old apartment's living spaces. I found myself back in Apartment 13, the room now familiar but imbued with a palpable sense of sorrow. I opened the door and stepped inside, the flickering light steady and warm. The spirits lingered in the corners, their faces now visible, eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. One by one, they approached me, their stories echoing in my mind. I listened, honoring their memories, and spoke words of comfort and understanding. The air lightened with each acknowledgement, the oppressive weight lifting as their spirits found solace in being heard. As the last spirit faded, a brilliant light filled the room, dispelling the darkness and leaving behind a sense of peace. The door to Apartment 13 swung open one final time, inviting me to leave. I stepped out, the hallway now bathed in a warm, steady light, free from the shadows that had haunted it for so long. The elevator doors opened effortlessly, welcoming me back to reality. I stepped inside, the doors closing behind me with a gentle thud. The rain had stopped, the storm giving way to a calm, clear night. As I made my way to my car, the weight of the experience settled over me, a mixture of relief and lingering sadness. Driving away from Elmwood Avenue, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the spirits watching me. But there was nothing, just the quiet streets of Chicago under the starry sky. Apartment 13 was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to the power of compassion and understanding. From that night on, every delivery carried with it a deeper sense of purpose. I became more attuned to the stories behind each address, recognizing that even the most ordinary tasks could lead to extraordinary encounters. And sometimes, when the rain began to fall, I'd catch a glimpse of a flickering light in my peripheral vision, a silent reminder of the night I delivered more than just pizza, and the souls I helped set free. Story number 6. Ghost in the Truck, New Orleans, Louisiana. Rain drummed incessantly against the windshield of my trusty delivery truck, turning the historic streets of New Orleans into a shimmering maze of reflections and shadows. The city was alive even in the dead of night, its vibrant energy pulsating through the narrow alleys and grand avenues. I was on my usual route for midnight pie, delivering hot, cheesy goodness to late-night patrons craving comfort in the midst of the storm. But tonight felt different, something about the air was thick with an unsettling tension that made my skin crawl. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was 2:47 a.m., just past the witching hour when New Orleans' legendary spirits were said to roam freely through the French Quarter. The area was renowned not just for its rich history and haunting beauty, but also for the countless ghost stories that locals whispered about in hushed tones. Tales of vengeful spirits, lost souls, and mysterious apparitions were as much a part of the city's fabric as its jazz and cuisine. The latest order had come in for an address on Bourbon Street, but not just any part of it. This was the old section, where the architecture had remained stubbornly unchanged, preserving the Gothic charm that made the area both enchanting and eerie. As I navigated the winding streets, the heavy rain making visibility a challenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles whitening as I tried to focus on the road. Suddenly, a flicker caught my eye in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just a reflection of the streetlights playing tricks on my mind. But as I slowed down, the flicker became more pronounced. There, in the back of my truck, sat the unmistakable outline of a person. My heart raced as I swerved to the side of the road, the tires screeching against the wet pavement. The truck came to a shaky halt, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I reached into the back, expecting to find a lost item or perhaps a stray animal that had climbed in. But there was nothing, just the empty, cold interior of the truck. Shaking my head, I convinced myself it was nothing more than a trick of the rain and the shadows. Maybe I was just overly stressed from the long shift. With a hesitant shrug, I started the engine and continued on my route. The order I was delivering was to a small, unassuming apartment building tucked away in a quieter part of the neighborhood. As I pulled up to the entrance, the rain seemed to lessen slightly, as if the storm itself was taking a brief respite. I grabbed the pizza from the insulated bag, the warmth still radiating from the box, and made my way to the building's front door. The lobby was dimly lit, the single bulb above the reception desk flickering intermittently. I knocked on the door marked Apartment 13, the number painted in elegant, albeit slightly faded, script. After a moment of silence, the door swung open, revealing a woman dressed in a simple black dress. Her pale skin contrasted sharply with the darkness of her attire, and her eyes held a distant, haunted look that sent a chill down my spine. "Delivery for you," I said, extending the pizza box. She took the box with a slow, deliberate motion, her fingers cold and unnervingly pale. As I turned to leave, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. Please, leave immediately." A shiver ran through me, and I nodded awkwardly, backing away from the door. As I made my way back to the truck, the rain had picked up again, pelting against the windshield with renewed fury. My mind was racing. Why was she so insistent that I leave? I opened the truck door, the sound echoing in the empty parking lot. Just as I was about to start the engine, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror again. There, in the reflection, was the same woman standing at the foot of the driveway, staring intently at me. My blood ran cold as I realized she wasn't inside the building. It was her, right there, looking through the mirror as if she were behind me. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding in my ears. The street was deserted, the only sound the relentless rain and the distant hum of the city. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light or my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. I reached for the ignition, fumbling with the keys in a panic. The engine turned over with a stubborn creak, but refused to start. Frustration and fear mingled inside me as I tried again, but the truck remained silent, refusing to budge. I was stranded, alone in the middle of a rain-soaked street with the weight of the night pressing down on me. Just then, the door to Apartment 13 swung open again, this time more violently, and the woman stepped out. Her eyes met mine in the mirror, and an eerie calm settled over her features. She walked towards the truck with deliberate, slow steps, her presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. "You shouldn't have delivered that pizza," she said, her voice carrying a sorrowful finality. "Now you must stay." Before I could react, the temperature around me seemed to drop, the rain turning into a thick, oppressive fog that enveloped the truck. The woman reached out her hand, and a force I couldn't understand pulled me towards her. I struggled, trying to break free, but it was as if invisible chains bound me to the truck, keeping me rooted in place. In my panic, I glanced back into the rearview mirror once more. There, behind me, the reflection showed not just a woman, but a shadowy figure standing in the back of the truck, a presence that exuded malice and despair. My mind reeled. How could there be two of her? Was the first one a ghostly apparition, or something far worse? The woman's grip tightened, and she leaned closer, her breath cold against my face. "Another one needs delivery," she whispered, the words sending a jolt of fear through my entire being. Suddenly, the truck started with a force that shook me to my core. The engine roared to life, and I jerked free from her grasp, stumbling back into the driver's seat. The truck lurched forward, the windshield glass shimmering with the reflection of the woman's sad eyes. I floored the accelerator, trying to escape the haunted building and the nightmares that had ensnared me. As I sped away, the streets of New Orleans blurred around me, the historic buildings passing by in a ghostly haze. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What had I just experienced? Was it a curse, a vengeful spirit, or something beyond comprehension? I couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over, that the woman's words held a truth I was yet to uncover. Back at the pizza shop, I tried to calm myself, recounting the events to Jake, my coworker. He listened with a mixture of skepticism and concern, his brow furrowing as I described the apparition and the ominous message. "Maybe you need to take a day off," he suggested gently. "Clear your head." But taking a day off wasn't an option. I needed the job to make ends meet. Plus, the mystery of apartment 13 gnawed at me, a puzzle I couldn't ignore. Determined to find answers, I decided to do some digging into the history of the building and the surrounding area. The next morning, armed with a cup of strong coffee and a resolve forged from fear, I headed to the local library. New Orleans was a city rich with history, and the records of its oldest buildings were meticulously kept. I found the old directory for Elmwood Apartments, the building that housed Apartment 13. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered that Apartment 13 had been vacant for decades, the previous tenants never found after a series of unexplained disappearances in the late 1920s. One name stood out in the records, Eleanor Black. She had been the last resident of Apartment 13, a young woman whose sudden disappearance had sparked rumors of hauntings and curses. According to newspaper archives, Eleanor was a single woman who had moved into the apartment seeking solace after a tragic loss. Her neighbors reported strange occurrences, unexplained noises, objects moving on their own, and an overwhelming sense of dread that seemed to emanate from her unit. The articles hinted at a dark presence, something that had driven Eleanor to madness before her disappearance. No one knew what had happened to her, and the apartment remained empty, avoided by tenants and delivery drivers alike. But why had my delivery drawn her back? Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to return to the apartment building, this time during the day when the sun would illuminate every corner, leaving no room for shadows to conceal secrets. As I approached Elmwood Apartments, the building stood silent and imposing, its grandeur now tarnished by time and neglect. The lobby was deserted, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and old wood. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor, the absence of the 13th floor making the journey feel even more surreal. Reaching apartment 13, I found the door locked, the brass knob cold and unresponsive to my knocks. Remembering the woman's instructions to leave immediately, I hesitated, then decided to take a closer look around the exterior of the building. As I walked down the narrow hallway, the stories of the past echoed in my mind. Apartment 13 wasn't just a number, it was a symbol of tragedy and mystery that had haunted the building for nearly a century. I found a window on the side of the building, its panes dusty and streaked with rain. Peering inside, I saw the empty room, untouched by time yet exuding an eerie stillness. That's when I noticed something, or rather, someone, standing in the corner of the room. A figure draped in black, much like the woman from my delivery, stood motionless, staring directly at me through the glass. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her disappear when I blinked, leaving me staring at the empty room once more. I turned away, feeling the weight of the building's history pressing down on me. Determined to find closure, I returned to my truck, ready to leave the haunted place behind. But as I reached for the keys, the truck refused to start, the engine silent and unresponsive once more. Frustration and fear mingled inside me as I tried again, but the truck remained stubbornly dead. I was trapped, just like I had been the night before, with the lingering presence of apartment 13 haunting my every thought. Desperate for answers, I decided to investigate further, determined to break the cycle of fear that had ensnared me. That night, armed with a flashlight and a notebook, I returned to Elmwood Apartments. The rain had eased, leaving behind a mist that clung to the air like a shroud. I made my way to the lobby, the building's facade looming ominously under the dim streetlights. The elevator doors opened with a creak, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 13th floor once more. The ride-up was eerily silent, the absence of any response from the elevator amplifying the tension. As I reached the destination, the doors opened to reveal apartment 13, the room bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. I approached cautiously, the flashlight casting long shadows along the corridor. The door stood ajar, inviting me into the unknown. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was pristine, untouched by time, with furniture arranged as if waiting for someone to return. But the atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with unspoken sorrow and lingering despair. As I explored the room, I felt a presence watching me, a silent observer hidden in the darkness. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, my breath visible in the cold air. In the rearview mirror of my truck, I saw the woman from before, now standing inside the apartment, her eyes filled with an overwhelming sadness. She raised her hand, pointing towards the corner of the room where Eleanor Black had once resided. Compelled by an unseen force, I walked towards the corner, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. There, amidst the shadows, I found a small, dusty diary lying on a table. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. As I opened it, the story of Eleanor Black unfolded before me, revealing the dark secrets that had cursed apartment 13. Eleanor had moved into the apartment seeking peace after the loss of her family in a tragic accident. But peace eluded her as she became haunted by visions of her loved ones and the malevolent presence that seemed to linger in the shadows. Desperate for answers, she delved into local legends, uncovering tales of a vengeful spirit that sought to trap souls within the building, feeding off their fear and sorrow. The diary entries became increasingly frantic, detailing Eleanor's descent into madness as the spirit grew stronger, manipulating her perceptions and driving her to the brink of insanity. The final entry was a desperate plea for help, a promise to break free from the torment that held her captive. As I read the diary, the room around me seemed to shift, the boundaries between the past and present blurring. The apparitions of Eleanor's family appeared, their ghostly forms reaching out to me with silent cries for salvation. The woman in black stood beside them, her presence a bridge between the living and the dead. Realizing that I had become entwined in Eleanor's story, I knew I had to find a way to free her spirit and break the curse that had plagued apartment 13 for nearly a century. The answers lay within the diary, the rituals that could release the trapped souls and bring peace to the restless spirits. Guided by the diary's instructions, I began the ritual, reciting the incantations and performing the necessary actions to sever the ties that bound the spirits to the apartment. The air crackled with energy, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within the room. As I reached the final verse, a brilliant light filled the space, dispelling the darkness and lifting the oppressive weight that had held me captive. The apparitions of Eleanor's family and the woman in black began to fade, their faces softening into expressions of gratitude and peace. The room transformed, the once haunted space now filled with a sense of calm and serenity. The truck outside hummed to life, the engine roaring with renewed vigor as if acknowledging the lifting of the curse. I stepped outside, the rain having ceased entirely, leaving the night calm and still. The streetlights cast a warm glow on the pavement, the oppressive atmosphere lifted by the resolution of a century-old mystery. As I drove away from Elmwood Apartments, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, seeing nothing but the clear reflection of the road ahead. The experience had changed me, deepening my understanding of the unseen forces that lingered in the shadows of New Orleans. From that night on, every delivery carried with it a heightened sense of awareness, a respect for the stories behind each address, and a reminder that sometimes, the most ordinary tasks could lead to extraordinary encounters. And sometimes, when the rain began to fall just right, I'd catch a glimpse of a woman in black in my peripheral vision, a silent guardian watching over the streets, a reminder of the night I delivered more than just pizza, and the souls I helped set free.